the reason that they're fighting each other is because of who they are. It's not so much that, Danny has never fought the weight class. So for him to walk right into a world title fight right there, you're already seeing that it has to do with names and it's not about rankings. So that's what makes this argument or this conversation a tricky one.
Welcome, fight fans, to Boxing Scene's top stories only on ProBox TV, your boxing channel. I am George DeMatteis. Don't forget to download the ProBox TV app, where apps are available to get the full ProBox TV experience with the long-form content, Wednesday night fights, and so much more on the ProBox TV app. And that also includes picking the brains and the great knowledge of our world champions, as we have Chris Algieri joining us here on Top Stories. Well, the co-main event of the Canelo Alvarez-Edgar Berlanga fight features ERISLANDY LARA versus Danny Garcia. Now, a couple of weeks ago here on Top Stories, we talked about if Danny Garcia, if he wins that fight, he is assured of a place, or looking like he will go to the Hall of Fame in Canastota, New York. But what about ERISLANDY LARA? If he beats Danny Garcia, who's a multiple division or multiple weight class world champion, is he a shoe in a lock for the International Boxing Hall of Fame? What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
George, I think with Lara, it's similar to what I was saying about Danny Garcia. I think there's a consideration for him in the Hall of Fame already, even before this fight even happens. And I don't know if this is the fight that puts it over the hump for Lara, more so specifically for Lara, because it's a little more of a reach for Garcia to win this fight. He's been out of the ring for 2 years. This would be his third weight class, third world title. That's a big deal. Also, skipping 154. So he's a world champion at 140, world champion at 147, skips the 154-pound division, beats Lara, and then he's a 160-pound middleweight world champion. You're pretty much a lock for Hall of Fame, but that's at that point. But for Lara, he's a world champion at 154, had some really good fights at 54 for some very, very top opposition, Canelo being one of them. And then to move up to 160, become a world champion there, but no big names at 160. I'm not considering Danny Garcia a big name at 160. The guy's never fought there. He's fought at 154 one time. So for Lara to beat Garcia, I'm not saying he's a lock for the Hall of Fame by any means. I think he's going to need to do more at 160 for that. But again, there's going to be an argument that he's already worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. He's a 2-division world champion. He's fought some big names. So yeah, I don't even know what the criteria is at this point for the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I get into arguments about this all the time. I rack my brain about who gets in and who doesn't. So I'm not really sure how to even approach this one. But in terms of this fight in particular, Garcia wins. Yeah, I think it's a much bigger jump and a much bigger argument for him to be in the Hall of Fame than so if Lara gets the win, because again, I don't consider Garcia a big name at 160. I don't even consider him a 160-pounder.
Yeah, probably when you consider the depth at 154, maybe it was smart for him to jump over 154 and fight at 160.
But that also hurts the case for Lara. So if you do beat Danny, the guy didn't win a world title at 54. It's not like he was, it's not like he got a 54, then came up and now he's looking for his 4th divisional title. He's a guy who skipped the weight class because there's not really a place for him there to be able to vie for a legitimate world title at 154. I don't know. I think it's a much tougher weight class. So he goes up to 60 to fight a 41-year-old world champion. So yeah, you got to look past the numbers on this fight and really past the names. You got to look past the names in this fight, because that's really what we're looking at here. You're looking at two great fighters. ERISLANDY LARA and Danny Garcia are fantastic champions and have been for a long time. And the reason that they're fighting each other is because of who they are. It's not so much that, Danny has never fought the weight class. So for him to walk right into a world title fight right there, you're already seeing that it has to do with names and it's not about rankings. So that's what makes this argument or this conversation a tricky one. You've got to, and again, why I'm, when we talk about Hall of Fame, I think that's a tricky, slippery slope as well. So, not really sure how to broach this question when it comes to Hall of Fame talk about these two quote unquote older guys who are fighting each other for a world title at a weight class that is pretty spotty.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the strategy in the ring there. What does Lara have to do to win this fight, and then what does Garcia have to do? The keys to victory for both fighters.
So Lara comes from that incredible Cuban boxing history, that style that became known as, that Cuban style boxing, which a lot of them were cuties in terms of they're hard to hit, they're slick, they slide. He's got that southpaw position, good jabs, good fundamentals, fantastic defense. But they used to not be punchers. But there's this new age Cuban that has come out and is more fighting off that front foot. We're seeing it with David Morrell Jr. We're seeing it with Andy Cruz, excuse me. We're seeing it now with even the evolution of ERISLANDY Lara. He's knocking guys out in 1, 2, 3 rounds now. Like he fights off that front foot. He's able to pull that trigger. He's putting guys away. He did it with Zarafa. He did it with Lamana. He did it with Spike O'Sullivan. Those are the guys that he's fought at 160, and he's almost turned himself into a puncher, after the age of 40, which has been very, very impressive. But listen, the skill set was always there. The fundamentals are there. He's just adapted to being an older guy who's not going to move around the ring as much. That being said, against Danny, moving is good. Danny has trouble with movers. Danny is a very solid puncher. He's a counter puncher, but he needs his feet set. And at times, guys like that tend to have slow feet. Danny tends to have slow feet, tends to have trouble with guys who can move on him. So if ERISLANDY Lara can reach back in that bag of being a younger man, move those feet, use that jab, hot shot, move around, keep circling, keep stepping around Danny. Because again, Danny wants to be set. He's sitting there locking up, looking for that big left hook counter in the middle. But if Lara can keep him off balance and keep his feet moving, I think he's got a really good shot to not only win this fight, but to dominate.
Yeah, and to your point, Chris, ERISLANDY Lara, 5 straight victories coming into this fight, 4 of them by way of knockout. So he has that power, has certainly that old man power. Maybe that's that old man power coming through for ERISLANDY Lara.
And George, wait till you see the tail of the tape of these two. Lara has like a 74-inch reach, and I think Danny's in like the 60s, like 68, something like that. Danny always had a very short reach. He uses it well because he's a power puncher, and he's very good at punching in the middle, but like the reach difference of these guys is going to be very different. Lara, his whole career is at 154. Danny won a world title at 140. These guys are not the same size. Lara has a very long reach. He's not quite as tall, but he has very long arms. He's more accustomed to the weight class, obviously. But Danny is a puncher. He's a very good counter puncher. He hits hard. Way more knockouts at 140 than at 147, but still had respectable power at 47. Even at 54, he looked powerful. We'll see how he looks at 160. But in terms of what Danny needs to do, he's got to get it. He got to get ERISLANDY Lara, to exchange with him. Because that's where Danny's best. He's a very, very, very good intuitive counterpuncher. He punches in the middle. He punches with you. He's got good timing. So if he can catch Lara and hurt him, I think that's his best path to victory. But man, Lara is a very tricky, slick guy, and if he utilizes that style, it's going to be really hard for Danny to overcome.
Yeah, it should be a fascinating fight. It might, in terms of the in-ring action, has the potential to maybe steal a little bit of the thunder of Canelo and Berlanga. And of course, the WBA middleweight title will be on the line when ERISLANDY Lara faces Danny Garcia in Vegas. And of course, big fight breakdown after that fight here on ProBox TV. All right, Chris, thanks for your time. We always appreciate you here on Top Stories. And we'd like to remind you to scan the QR code, download the ProBox TV app where apps are available, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Another edition of the best live fight series in all of boxing, October 9th, Wednesday night fights here on ProBox TV. And then in a couple of days' time, Canelo Alvarez, Edgar Berlanga, and big fight breakdown to talk about that. And maybe Lara Garcia as well here on ProBox TV. It's going to be a great weekend of boxing. I'm George DeMatteis. Thank you for watching Boxing Scene's Top Stories.
He's the pride of Guadalajara, the Mexican maestro, the unified super middleweight champion of the world, Canelo Alvarez. His challenger, undefeated knockout artist and pride of Puerto Rico, Edgar Berlanga. It's prime time.
Canelo versus Berlanga, plus Lara versus Garcia. Saturday, September 14th, live on PBC pay-per-view on Prime Video.
Wednesday Night Fights.
Dynamite action on Wednesday Night Fights every other Wednesday on your boxing channel.
Coming up on your next Wednesday Night Fights, October 9th. Chris, Primetime Colbert, and Omar Super Salcido step into the ring for what is sure to be a barn burner. Live from the ProBox Event Center in Plant City. Get your tickets at ProBoxTV.com or take your chances at the door. Wednesday Night Fights.
For more ProBox TV, scan the QR code on the screen or go to the App Store and Google Play. ProBox TV, your boxing channel.